way too kind. Thanks, man. That was great. Well, it's exciting to be here. I'm actually from the Midwest, so this is like a homecoming for me. So this is fun. Never given a talk in an airplane hangar before, so a little bit different. But so I want to tell you a little bit about what we do. This is a person named Miss Rita. I want you to meet her because she's great. She lives in New Orleans, and do you know what she does for 2 hours every day? She tracks down blighted housing in the city. So she and a lot of other people in her community care about vacant housing, because if you're in New Orleans, this is a big issue, right? After Hurricane Katrina, and actually even before that, this has been a systemic problem inside the community. And so the community really cares about this, right? Because crime happens in vacant housing, right? These are real issues for local communities. So Miss Rita and her friends spend 2 hours every day walking around the city to map out where the vacant housing is in the city. Crazy thing about the story, though, is the mayor has that same question. That's the mayor of New Orleans. And he wants to know where vacant housing is in his city because he wants to deal with it. He actually made a commitment that during his term, he was going to deal with 100,000 vacant houses in New Orleans. And he turned to his CIO, a guy named Alan Square, a great guy, a very smart guy. And he asked Alan, he said, when can I have an app where I can go to any house in the city and see the status of it? And the CIO said, I want that too, but it's going to take me 3 years, and it's going to cost me $30 million. So the organization I work for, Code for America, well, we send fellows into cities, and I'll tell you a little more about it. Well, they were able to build an application in 6 weeks, just blight status. You put in the location of a house, and it gives you back exactly what the status of it is, what the city knows about it. Is it vacant or is it not? Is it blighted or not? Is the city doing something about it? And you can do nice things like see a map view or whatever. The point, though, isn't that the application is cool or interesting. The point is this. This is what Fast Company said. They said the app proposes a new kind of more productive communication between the two groups that moves past angry and frustrated citizens on one end and the paralyzed city on the other. Alan Square spoke at our conference last year that we had, and he came on stage and he said, the application blight status changed the conversation. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, which is how can technology change the conversation between citizens and their cities? How can you fundamentally change the way the citizen, Miss Rita, and the mayor interact through technology? And that's what you're able to do now because of the way technology works. So let me back up now and tell you a little bit what specifically we do. So Code for America, we're a startup. This is the first sign that we had in our office. I actually hand drew that with some watercolor pens, so like we're still kind of scrappy. It started in 2009 with this basic notion, which is how can you bring citizens and technology to bear on reinventing the way cities work? So we started this thing, it's a Peace Corps for Geeks. We actually have some fellows here in Kansas City this year. And the idea is that people will give a year of service. Technologists, designers, developers, entrepreneurs will spend a year working with cities to help them innovate. So they build different technology, engage the citizens, work with the community to see what you can do fundamentally differently. The first year we had 3 cities, last year was 8, and this year 9, and Kansas City is one of them. And we're doing some really fun stuff, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And so the core notion is kind of technology is at this turning point, right? Where it's becoming more physical, becoming more real. And it's changing the way businesses work. I'm sure each of you as entrepreneurs know this, right? You can use technology to change the way your company works. Well, how can you change the way government works using technology? And so that's what we're trying to do. What I wanted to do was tell you a little bit of the history of kind of what we've learned and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and share some perspectives on what's possible and what we're going to do at Kansas City, if that's okay. So we started in 2011, our first year. We kind of knew what we were doing, but not really. And we're still kind of learning what's possible. So we hired guys like this. This is a guy named Max Ogden, who is one of our fellows working in the city of Boston. So Max is a great open source developer. He's terrific, really smart. Problem with Max is Max doesn't know how to tie a tie. And so we sent him to the city of Boston to go work in the mayor's office, and they all wear suits, and our fellows don't wear suits. So one thing we've learned is we have to kind of understand the context within which we're working and figure out how to be effective in that situation. And so we sent Max there, we sent 5 other fellows there to work with the city. And they were actually going to work on a tool to help open up data for the city's school system. Turns out that was really hard. because there's a lot of privacy challenges and issues around getting access to student data. And so they started working on that. They spent a lot of time working on it. And honestly, they couldn't get anywhere because it was just too hard from a legal perspective. So instead, during the middle of the year, the mayor actually got into a lot of trouble with the press in the city. The Boston Globe ran an editorial saying the process by which parents have to choose their schools for their kids was way too complicated. If you see here, this is the PDF, or actually a brochure they send to parents every year. It's 38 pages. No one can parse it. I mean, I can't even read it from here, right? And parents got really frustrated, right? Because the rules around which schools their kids can go to are complicated but important, right? It's your kids' schools. And so the parents got really frustrated about this, and they asked us then to say, hey, what can you do to change this system? Well, so we built this. It's called Discover BPS. It's like a Yelp for schools. Not complicated, nothing crazy, but this is what parents needed. They needed an easy, streamlined way to see how their school districts work. And the reason I tell that story is for two reasons. One is this. This is why our fellows do what they do. They believe that interfaces to government can be simple, beautiful, and easy to use. And that's what that is. It's a simple Yelp-like tool, but it's simple, it's beautiful, and it's easy to use. And it's the way you want to interact with your city. But the other reason I tell this story, because this one blows my mind, we asked our government partners. So we work directly with the city. They bring us in. So if you had to build a tool like Discover BPS, how much would it cost you and how long would it take? They said it would take 2 years and cost $2 million. And we were able to do it in like 2 months with a team of about 1.5 people. And so what we're trying to do is show what's possible for governments, right? Help them understand what's out there, what's feasible now, given the landscape we're in with technology, and how they can leverage it to be more open and engaged with citizens. So on this notion of simple, beautiful, and easy to use, this is not. This is honolulu.gov. This is the city website for Honolulu, which was one of our partners last year, which I nicely got to travel to, which was great. But this is the city website. And again, citizens say, this city website is broken. It's not useful for me. And in fact, the city, when we came in, said, can you guys fix that? And we're like, rebuilding an entire city website, and so it's a year-long program. Rebuilding a whole website in 1 year is going to be really tough. We didn't know if we can do that. But then we thought about it, and we looked at, actually, you should check out gov.uk, which is the website that the UK government's building. And they began with this simple premise, which is that governments like this are organized by departments, right? You can see up there, it says agencies and departments, online services, businesses, residents. Like, why online services isn't the whole homepage? I don't know, right? Like, but it's organized based on verticals, right? But citizens don't think like that. We don't think like that. When you think about your government website, what are you thinking? I have this question I need answered, all right? I have this problem I need solved. So we built a new version. Oh, sorry, I should show you this. So this is, if you want to look for driver's license information, this is the first page you get, and then this is the second page you get. And like, there's just no way to make heads or tails of what you're seeing there. And so what we decided is, what if we center it on the search? What if we center it on the citizen's question? And so we built this thing called Honolulu Answers. It's really simple. You just put in a question, how do I get my driver's license renewed? And it just gives you the answer, right? It's like, here are the 2 different questions, and then here's the specific steps. And like, we spent a lot of time working on this simple design, where it's like, here are the 5 steps that you need to know about. And so what this is doing is it's building new experiences for citizens and really changing the way citizens interact with their government. But the coolest thing about the story is, so we send teams of about 3 or 5 fellows to cities. And you can imagine these people have a lot of questions about their cities, right? Hundreds, right? And the fellows can't write all of that content. They just don't have enough time. They have to build the technology, deploy it, get users, et cetera. And so they asked themselves, how can we get a lot of content? How can we get more information in the system? They turned to the community. So they actually held this thing called a write-a-thon. You guys have probably heard about a hackathon. But they decided that actually people could write for their city and not just code for it. And so they had these weekend events where basically hundreds of people would come out and they would write content for the city, working collaboratively with the city staff. Think about that. A citizen-written website for their government. And so this is what's possible when you're able to use technology and then engage citizens to try things differently. So that actually was a story from the last year. Now I'm going to speak specifically about 2012. And the thing about last year is I ran around the office the whole time saying, civic startups, civic startups, civic startups. And this is what happened. So have you guys ever been to a town hall meeting for a city? or planning. Yeah, Stephen from Mind Mixer back there has been to these. But they're typically held at like 7 o'clock in City Hall, so like 10 people show up, right? And the thing is, these are really important decisions being made about your city, right? Do I want to park here? Do I want to mall there? And so in the city of Philadelphia last year, they wanted us to take on this question. How can you reimagine the ways the city planning works? And so they built an app called Textizen. And these are the posters they put up in the city. The great thing about this is that you want to ask people, and you as an entrepreneurs know this, you want to engage your consumers, your customers, where they are, right? You don't want to make them go somewhere new, but cities typically don't do that. They don't engage people where they are. Well, we decided, let's change that. So throughout the city of Philadelphia, they put up these posters. Would you like to see a rapid transit line? They put them on buses. They put them inside bus stops. Because that's where people are, and that's where people are engaging with their city, and that's where you should ask them the questions. And so it's a simple SMS tool. It's actually not complicated. Like, I could write this code, and I'm not a programmer. And it's just basically give feedback, and now your city's working. The point is that it changes the dynamic. It's saying, I don't want the same 50 people over and over and over again coming to my city meeting. I want new people, and I want to ask them new questions, different questions, engage them in new ways. And that's what this tool allows. But here's the funny thing about the story. We put up a simple web form when the thing went live in Philadelphia saying, hey, would you like Textizen in your city? Within the first month, 200 different cities said they wanted it in their area. Because there's a demand, and that's the thing that people don't understand about city government, is that there's actually an interest and a need to change things, and folks inside cities understand that. They just need the tools and resources to do something differently. And that's what something like Textizen is doing. So now these guys, I'm proud to say, have made a civic startup, have a paying client, and you guys know how hard it is to make that first sale, and they're making this into a business. And that's what's really great to see. It's the evolution of this ecosystem and make it more sustainable. And here's the thing about government. People say it's broke, that it doesn't have any money. Do you know how much money government spends on technology every year? $140 billion. Federal, state, and local. $140 billion. And to put that in perspective, the video game market, like Halo, Xbox, $10 billion. The iPhone app market, which like everyone's clamoring to build an iOS app, $2 billion. So the government technology market is massive. And there's a huge opportunity to disrupt that market with interesting technology. And that's what we're trying to do now. And so actually, from the last year fellowship class, so we have 8 projects a year, 3 of them have become startups. Texas is an example. Blight Status, which I mentioned earlier, is actually now making a startup, and another one called Local Data, which is from Detroit. So you're seeing the emergence of a civic startup ecosystem, which is really championed by folks like Steven back there, who works for Mind Mixer. So last year, we also added to our program offerings. When you work in nonprofits, you talk about programs, not products. And so we run programs. And we ran an accelerator. This is kind of like Y Combinator or Techstars, if you're familiar with it. We're trying to bring civic startups from the outside, bring them into the network, help them, give them funding and support, and really get them more clients and traction in the industry. And so last year, we opened up a call. We decided to do this, and I don't know if Lisa Mitchell is here. The Kauffman Foundation is a big supporter of ours and made this possible. We decided to do this in the middle of last year, but decided that we wanted to get it done by the end. So we had 4 weeks to recruit companies. So I lost my mind a little bit, but we had 235 companies apply. Think about that. The first year of an accelerator program that's focused on government technology had 235 applicants. And these are the 7 we picked. So Mind Mixer, if you don't know about these guys, you should. They're the best-in-class software for civic engagement. They work with cities to help them kind of get best ideas from their citizens and help crowdsource the plans that the city should have. Measured Voice helps cities use social media because they need to bubble up the best ideas for what to share and then strategically think about when to do it. I also personally really like Aunt Bertha. So this is a guy who, his aunt, his name's Aaron Gray, was on social services, but didn't know which services she was eligible for. So he wanted to build a tool to make it easier for people to find out their services. The coolest thing about Aunt Bertha is they're actually building like an open table now for social services. Because I'm from San Francisco, and when you're there, you basically see people waiting around the corner to try to get food stamps, to try to get access to a homeless shelter, which is like heartbreaking to see. And the problem is when that happens, you don't get a chance to actually go get job training or interview for a job because you're busy waiting in line to get access to this homeless shelter. And so he's trying to make it easier for those shelters themselves to allocate and identify resources so that way you don't have to wait in line. You actually will know if there's a resource here or where else to go. And so this is like important, life-changing work. And that's what the great thing about these civic startups are. They're not just building an Airbnb for Dropbox. They're building real companies that are helping people's lives work better, right? So that was 2012, and now we're moving into 2013. And now it's getting interesting because we've gone from this general notion of engagement, of open data, of openness, to kind of some more messy stuff, like the Department of Corrections. In the cities of Louisville and New York City, they've asked us to tackle the question of pre-trial incarceration rates. So I don't know if you guys understand what I'm talking about there, but basically if you get arrested, right, you get to go to a bench trial to see if you're going to be thrown in jail for, or let free before your even actual trial. This is just to decide if you're going to be held in prison for a while. And this is the kind of technology that they're working with right now. And there's been studies that show that apparently the most likely indicator of whether or not you get thrown in jail or let free is whether or not the judge had lunch that morning or not. Like, that's how this stuff is determined. Well, there's this great organization called the Arnold Foundation that's done a lot of research into this. And they've looked at it and found out that there's some real algorithms you can use. What someone's job history was like, what they, whether or not they showed up to school every day. You can use that kind of data to decide whether or not someone should actually be thrown in jail or not. And so they want us to help work with the city of New Orleans and the city of Louisville to actually build technology that gives them some insight into that. But here's the funny thing. It's like we talk about algorithms and like helping judges make better decisions. There's simple stuff that they're building. So we had our fellows actually take a ride with the cops driving around the city to like get a sense of how it worked. And like you learn this crazy stuff. When you get a bench warrant, which is like a reason that you have to show up, you get a little card that's like this big that says your time and your date of your trial. And if you lose that, there's no record inside the city hall where you can find out what your time is for the trial. And so you don't have any access to that information. And if you miss that trial, you get arrested and you have to go to jail for X amount of days. And it's like, so simple little things like that are the problems you have to take on when you're working with city government. So the fellows are going to build a notification app that basically an SMS tool that gets a text message whenever your trial is going to be. And it's simple things, but small pieces that really matter. So I wanted to speak a minute about what we're doing specifically with Kansas City and how folks here might be able to get involved. So we're recruiting for our accelerator. If you guys have a civic startup like MindMixer or like Neighborly, you should apply. Think about doing that because that's a really great opportunity to get access to a lot of new government clients. We have a fellowship program, which is open calls. You don't have to be a coder if you're not. You can also be a community manager, or a project manager, or an entrepreneur coming to join that. It's a year-long program. You get mentorship, training, support, access to a lot of great people, and the chance to do something that really matters. Right? You get to spend your time helping cities work differently, which is not a bad way to spend some time. And then we also have a brigade here locally. Is Jace here? I don't know if I see Jace. So Jace is our brigade captain. So we have this volunteer program, basically, where people who don't want to give a whole year of service, but want to be able to hack in their free time or hack on the weekend. So the write-a-thons are run by the brigade in Honolulu. They basically come together, redeploy existing civic technology, work with the city to build new things, write for the city website. And that's a really great opportunity to get involved locally here in Kansas City. And finally, like, just think about how you can be more civically engaged. Like, how can you use MindMixer to help your city work differently? How can you use, there's a Wiki KC, if you've heard about that, which is a local community website that's all about how to document and curate your local city. And so how can you use those platforms to really make your city a better place? There's this quote I read last year that's really stuck with me. So this is Auden writing about the Spanish Revolution. He was talking about how the city is theirs, and if you want to make it better, you really have to make it your own. And he had this line, "We are left alone with our day." And the first time I read that, I first thought, oh wow, that's really sad and pessimistic, like we're screwed, we're on our own. But then I read it again, and I read the second line, and time is short. And the point is that we have control of our day, right? This is our making. Our city's our own. My friend Tim O'Reilly uses the phrase, government is what we do together, right? You can complain about government, or you can realize that we live in a democracy, and this is ours to do, and these are our cities. And we are left alone with our day, and time is short. And what I would say is think about how you can code for America in the ways that you live your day-to-day lives, with your companies, with your organizations, with your colleagues. And think about what you can do to make Kansas City even better, or whatever city you're from. Because coding for America isn't something you just do in San Francisco. It's what you do everywhere, and it's what you do with your cities. Thank you.
Awesome. We'll take some questions.
Yeah.
That was amazing. You're going to be president of the United States one day. You are. Does anyone else feel that? I feel it. Yeah. I don't know if you want to, but it's going to happen.
Any questions?
Any questions? An opportunity to ask a question to the next president of the United States. Yes, and just say your name, too.
Hey, my name's Ben. I heard you talking a little bit about how, like, just for an example, for Blight Status was going, sounded like turning into their own startup.
Yeah.
And that just kind of blew my mind a bit. I'm like, whoa, hang on, weren't those Code for America fellows? Like, how did that happen? Can you, like, elaborate a little bit more about how startups are spinning off? Or
No, I walk around the office with a bat, and sometimes just, no. So what's great about, so what we're learning is that whenever you build something, you should actually tell people that we could redeploy this elsewhere. Because we have this phrase, build locally, spread nationally. Because we think that anything you build shouldn't just be for one city, but it should be for any city. And so we talk to them, and they saw a lot of traction for what they're doing. And then they're like, well, this could be an interesting startup idea. And so we help them. So we now actually run an incubator to help fellowship projects specifically become startups. And so we give them some funding, we give them some mentorship. Because it's what's interesting is when you join as a fellow, you're not necessarily an entrepreneur, right? But the evolution from being a developer or a coder to becoming an entrepreneur is really interesting to see. And we're learning some best practices that how to help them. So in that specific case, the city of New Orleans said they want to keep this tool for after the fellowship. So they're helping fund that company initially. We're helping them fund them a little bit more. And they've made some interesting partnershis. There's a company called Acela that does a lot of business processing. They're helping them kind of get ramped up in different cities around the country. And the other thing I'll say is the Knight Foundation, if you know about them, they do a lot of work helping open journalism efforts, and now they're focusing on open government. And they've made grants to some of our companies that have been really helpful as well. Yeah.
And, nobody else is asking questions, so I got a follow-up question. So it sounds like, because whenever those apps you're talking about and stuff, sounds like, well, that could totally spread nationally and help other cities and stuff. So is it pretty common? I mean, what's the ratio of like tools that are being built that actually do spin off to be their own startups? Like, I could imagine that happening all the time.
Yeah. So last year we had 8 city engagements. 3 of them became became startups. What's great is everything we build is we code in public, and everything we build is open source, which is to say freely available for anybody to reuse and redeploy. And so we have, I think, 250 projects on GitHub, which is our open source code project, and anybody can take those and redeploy them. So one thing the brigade does specifically is take those apps and redeploy them. So it's 3 out of 8. We have to see how well they do, but I mean, per the Mind Mixer story and per the accelerator stuff, you're seeing actually the emergence of a lot of interesting civic startups. So it's a cool space to get into. Yeah.
Thanks. My name is Stephanie, and I work on the side before you get to the city, the elected side.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you're seeing anything on that side of the industry, because once you get people in there, if they do a bad job or they have a wrong vision or they have a self-promoting vision, you don't get that tech foresight, that progressive vision of what a city can be.
So you're saying, to what extent do we work with mayors or cities?
Yeah, I work, my job is to get the right people elected.
Okay.
So are you seeing any movement on that side of things before you get to community
Yeah.
building? You have to have the right people in place to make those decisions.
Well, if I'm going to be the next Barack Obama, then I'm not going to share all my secrets. But, no, you're seeing actually a lot of mayors specifically get this. Because if you're, so we work specifically at the bureaucratic level. Like, we try to make bureaucracy sexy. Like, this is the day job that we have. It's not at the politics stuff, because everyone cares about politics, but the day-to-day of government happens at the bureaucracy level, right? But mayors get that, right? Mayors are executives. They have to run the city. And how big is Kansas City? That's a huge government to run to support that city, right? And so Mayor Sly and Mayor Reardon are executives running that city as an executive, right? And so what they're understanding now is that they have to use technology to basically help them do their job, because technology helps them bring down the costs and also improve services. So you're seeing some resonance there, and you're seeing, and to the federal level, you're actually seeing the White House actually send a message that this matters a lot to them. And so that's actually helping get more people interested in the mix. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but okay.
Hey there, my name's Nate, and I've gotten to work with the A team, the Code for
Andrew
America
and
fellows.
Allison and Ariel, yeah.
And they've been great, and I think, you know, the amazing part of the process is they come, they spend like the first 6 weeks just like listening
Yeah.
to people, and they're able to, I don't know, so I thought it was really interesting what you mentioned, like, to rebuild the website, it'll take 1 year and $2 million to do it, and then, or to find that solution, you know? Like, why is it, it seems like it's a really logical process to just sit down and kind of hash it out and to
Yeah.
talk to different players, but you guys are really coming in, and since you're kind of this third party, it seems like it's okay, you know, like, oh, they have the way forward. So I guess what I'm getting at is, what's something that we can take away, because they really are only coming for a year, and it's great, but what are some of the things that we can, like the teachable moments we can take away and implement, you know, in all of our communities, like just the way we communicate with one another and how we can break down some of these barriers?
Yeah, that's great. What I would say is you should meet Ashley Han, the new Chief Innovation Officer for the city. She's great. I just had lunch with her today. She's doing some really interesting stuff. But so the reason we have a year-long model and don't do just open consulting with cities is specifically for that reason. Like, we don't want to be, I don't like this phrase, but someone used it once, we don't want to be the innovation ghetto for a city. But we want to help the city learn how to be more innovative and more connect with their community. So for us, the goal at the end of the year is basically to say, all right, we did some cool stuff in the city, but we're walking away now. What can the city and the community do together, right? And so what we're learning is there are a couple of key things. It's hard for people to find the space to innovate, right? I mean, you all have day jobs, you're working really hard, and it's hard to think, oh, what can I do differently, right? And now put yourself in a city government with all the constraints of that, and ask yourself to do the same thing. It's insane. It's really hard. And so what the fellows provide is the opportunity to say, all right, let's think about this differently. What could we change in this process? And how could we actually re-engineer the way a city works? And so what we want to do ideally is we leave a city and then they are committed to doing that in an ongoing fashion. So what I would say is have a weekly meetup with your city. The brigades do this. They do a weekly just meetup where they talk about interesting challenges and interesting things to do. And that actually leads to a lot of great outcomes. Like the city of Chicago did some great stuff by just having a chance every week to talk. And there's 1 million cups here, I think, right? Which is like a good opportunity for that. I've heard about that. Yeah. Oh.
About it too, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, no, sorry.
All right. Didn't know I was accidentally.
No, it's fine.
Well, there you go. See, that's the thing you should do, right? And then make sure every time you have a city government official there, right? And make sure you're asking them to share what are challenges in your job, what are opportunities that you're seeing, because that's how you start becoming what I call like the mesh, right? Like that mesh layer between the government and the city that really leads to bigger outcomes in the long run.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Luke. This actually, your talk kind of reminded me, there was a DVD or a movie back probably 4 or 5 years ago called Startup that was about a civic startup and the kind of the problems they face trying to get into the municipalities. I'm curious, how do you overcome just bureaucracy, the red tape, to even get an audience with the decision makers and try to push some of these apps
Totally.
into use?
I mean, so I would say people have in their head that procurement and the way in which government buys technology is so hard that you can't get over it, you can't deal with it, don't even get in that area. You're crazy to start a company doing that. I think that's wrong. I actually think you can build a company, and we're seeing examples of how it works, where you say, I'm building a really interesting, cool product. I'm going to figure out a way to get it sold to a government. And usually what you can do is find some, we call them change agents, some change agent inside of a government who understands the way things need to change, and they'll figure it out. Like, it's not going to be easy, but you can figure it out if you're willing to dedicate resources and time, and you build a great, useful product. And I think the biggest challenge we've run into is that people have a perception in their minds that you can't sell to government. It's a $140 billion industry. Someone's selling to government, right? So the question is, how do you become that person, and how do you help them work differently? And I think people should start being confident and honest that they can get this done, and we're happy to help. And you just have to work the process. The last thing I'll say is our key goals are actually changing policies inside government. And so one thing we're doing is trying to change some of the rules to make it a little bit easier.
Chris, I actually talked to you last night.
Yeah.
But one of the questions I had was, of all of the governments and municipalities that you've gone into, how many ideas or projects or things that you proposed have not been put into place because of political
Totally.
issues, or does that factor into it?
No, that's a great question. I mean, so in Seattle, our first year, we built 3 different tools, and none of them actually got taken up by the city. And we're honest about that and open about it, because we're a startup and we're learning, and sometimes you fail. And what happens in a lot of cases is that the city wants something, cares about it, but then some of the hurdles you have to get over to maintain it and sustain it in the long run are too hard, right? And this is why we really emphasize startups in companies that actually help the city in an ongoing way, and not just kind of give them a piece of technology and say, here, work with this. And so those are some of the barriers are sustainability, having the technical skills inside of a city to kind of maintain a tool after you build it. We write in Ruby on Rails, if you're familiar with that, and a lot of cities write in COBOL or .NET. And so getting them comfortable with our technical infrastructure is always a challenge. So sometimes we have to do things like trainings or skill shares to actually get the cities on board and understanding how to use this technology. And then lastly, I mean, you have to think about everyone already has a full-time job, right? They already have this work that they're doing. And adding on additional layers of engagement and additional responsibilities is always a challenge. So you have to set it up in a way where it really seems like a value add and really seems like a way to help the city work more efficiently in the long run. Like blight status, for instance, actually made the job of the CIO better, right? He was able to have visibility, the mayor was able to have visibility of that. And so they want to commit to maintaining that, which is why they're helping them become a startup, because it actually helps their day-to-day operations. And I would just emphasize that thinking about how to support the efficiency and ongoing operations of a city is really important.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm back with Handprint, and when we were at the launch party for Code for America, one of the first ideas we had was actually like an open interface where people could vote and decide on what murals get put up in cities.
Oh, cool.
And we were wondering, where do you draw the line between creative apps that are more for community members, or ones that actually solve problems like flash trials?
Yeah, no, it's a tricky thing. There's great public art in the city, by the way, right? I've just noticed that it's amazing.
That's exactly. That's what inspired
I was
that.
driving around and I was like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, and there's huge factories that could have murals on them. So.
Yeah. I mean, we leave it really up to the city. I mean, and the research. I mean, that's one part of the model that we really try to bring to bear in cities, is that they don't, we want to make sure you're doing user-driven development. And so we ask a lot of questions when our fellows come to a city. The A team that was mentioned beforehand is our fellows here in the city. They did 100+ interviews, right? Talking to everybody that give them time to find out what's really needed. And so we don't guide or tell them what to build. They basically, depending on what they hear and what's needed, they build that. But I think there's a huge opportunity both on the community side and on the city side. But what we try to emphasize is stuff that really has an impact. And that's the biggest metric.
All right. Thanks.
Great. We'll take one last question.
Abhi, you get to talk to a lot of different communities about their wish lists for projects, and I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience. I'm wondering if you picked up some patterns in the things that communities, cities across the country are asking for?
That's a great question. And Stephen was part of our accelerator, so he's basically just teeing this up for me. So thanks. The biggest, the biggest stuff I'm hearing at least, is performance management, right? Because again, a city manages a massive infrastructure, right? And you fix things like potholes and manage vacant housing. And so tools for the mayor, for the chief of staff, for the people inside of a city to basically manage that process better, get better visibility into it, and be able to make better data-driven decisions is a huge need. And then the other one is more context about what's happening in a city. So the city of Chicago is doing a great tool where they're trying to get, so there's you guys have a 3-in-1 system here. I think it's PeopleSoft is the tool you guys have for submitting issues with your city. So it turns out if you want a really great picture of what's happening in your city, you want to use that, but also supplement it with Twitter, because people are going to tweet about the pothole they just ran over, and Facebook, because people are going to post about how they're upset about the graffiti next to their house. So you want to leverage social data on top of civic data to get a real picture of what's happening, and people want tools like that. So it's really about data and about leveraging data to make better decisions.
Great. Thank you, Abhi.
Thanks, man.
One last question.
Yeah.
Why do you do what you do? What drives you? What fuels you?
I've never been comfortable with the phrase, like, that's just how it is. Like, I don't like people complaining, because I feel like if you care about something, you should make it better. And so that's why I got into government work, because I care about people and I care about my communities and I want to make them better. And so I figured, why complain about it when you can code for it?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you've got my vote. Thank you. Give it up, everyone, for Abhi and Nemani. Thank you, Abhi.